So we will dive into spoilers for this movie, just as a heads up, but not quite yet. We're going to just give our general thoughts about Venom: The Last Dance. In case you haven't seen the movie, or in case you plan to see it later, we're just going to start with some big picture thoughts about our takeaways from the film, and then we're going to dive into full spoilers and talk about all the major events that occurred throughout the movie and ultimately what it may mean for the future of the Venom character, other characters, the Sony Spider-Man, Marvel Universe, and everything that connects there. But with all of that said, man, I'll pass it to you to officially kick off and let us know what your thoughts on Venom: The Last Dance were.
Venom: The Last Dance is exactly what I expected it to be. And that doesn't necessarily mean it was good, nor do I think it was an absolute train wreck of a film. But my expectations were pretty much met with what I thought this movie was going to be. I know there's no carnage in the film. I know Venom and Tom Hardy was coming back as both Venom and Eddie Brock. I thought this film was just technically it's not a good movie, but it's also not a bad time. It's just kind of Venom what space that it occupies. This film has, I think, some fun things in it, some fun things about it that are very comic booky that a lot of other comic book films can't do at the time because of I think how critical we are of them and how serious everything has to be, and some stuff we can still have fun with, but Venom has something different about it where they just kind of take the leash off and like go do a bunch of stuff, and that bunch of stuff doesn't mean it necessarily works either. There's fun to be had, there's laughs to be had, there's a lot of things that had me cackling in this film. There are moments, action moments that had me going, oh shoot, that thing was really cool, or that was a fun idea. But I think, overall the plot was simply lost. There was fragments of what a plot could be. They introduce again, this is in the trailer, but they introduce Noel, who is not really used in the film in particular. Whatever, I don't know what they're doing with Noel, but this is just a film that I think if you like the first two and you know what those movies are and you know that you can laugh and have fun but not take the plot too serious, that's exactly what this is. I will say I like the needle drops in this movie. I think they're fun. I like a lot of the music here. I think some of the things they were doing were like, that's a good idea because this works in whatever weird universe that you have going here. But as a story, as something comprehensive, it's not really there. If there's any logic, that we get it, these are comic book movies, but if there's any logic you have for these films, this movie, I mean, there's none. Like, there's a lot of things that happen here that simply don't make sense. And even though it's comic book, doesn't mean it shouldn't make sense. It should still make sense. But there's a lot of things here that just don't work out. I will say Tom Hardy as both Eddie Brock and Venom is still the best part of the movie. They are funny. But there's also a ton of things here that just could have been better in the other side of things. But I'm not gonna spend too much time on it. It's just, if you know what Venom is and you have seen the trailer for this film, I think you know what you're gonna get, and that's what I got. I got exactly what I think I knew I was gonna get. Not a good movie, but also not a bad time.
So I don't really have anything eloquent to say about Venom: The Last Dance beyond the fact that this is a bad movie. It's just an outright bad movie. I didn't like it. I think it's the worst of the Venom films. I think that the first hour is truly boring and didn't move me in any which way. I think the action is pretty bad for most of the film. The performances are all over the place. The plotting and the pacing is confusing. And worst of all, their biggest advantage and the biggest thing in their toolbox, which is Tom Hardy and the relationship between Eddie Brock and Venom, is underutilized. They don't even use that relationship and that advantage and that strength of these films as much as they should have, especially considering that this is the last film. And so, Venom: The Last Dance, it's a no from me. Complete, absolute miss. I think that this is a pretty bad note to go out on for this character. Not saying that those other two films are great. They're not. I remember even watching the first Venom film and not liking it, but then upon rewatch, I liked it more. and still walked away saying like, yeah, it's not a good movie, but I can enjoy it, I can laugh at it, I can have fun with it. And then I think Venom Let There Be Carnage is probably the most successful in terms of what it set out to do and actually achieving
Mhm.
that and striking the perfect tone for what it was going after. This movie is just a dud for me. It's a complete dud for me. I don't really understand what happened here. Perhaps it was the writer strike. Perhaps it's the fact that Kelly Marcel is a first time filmmaker. I don't want to throw her under the bus in that respect, but she hasn't made a movie before. She has been tied to this film and this franchise for a number of years, but this is her first time behind the director's chair in any capacity. And that's a lot of
Not even a
pressure. That's just a
commercial.
lot. It's a lot to do. Nothing. So
Nothing.
that's just a lot to ask for a person, especially knowing that you had two films to work off of and you had to live up to a certain lineage of legacy. But I don't know if that does any favors for this film. And everything here is just really, really, it's just really crazy to me how it ended up this way. But I
Mhm.
guess it can't be that crazy because I think in watching this, I just realized that it kind of just feels like they ran out of ideas. Like they just didn't really have anything else genuinely to say about the character and to do. Like once they did Carnage,
Mhm.
which was the, sort of the end all be all for what we wanted to see, Venom versus Carnage, and you're not using Spider-Man, well, what do? Like, where do you go? You're just going to introduce a relatively new character from the comics that's not even in the movie, if we're being honest. And so most of the time, Eddie Brock and Venom are fighting just nothing symbiotes. Like, okay. So overall, it's bad. It's just a bad movie. I just got to be honest about it. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like it. The only positive things really to take away from it, I will say the VFX are good. I thought
Mhm.
that the
Mhm.
visual effects here, I had no problem with that stuff. I think that everything looks really, really good, especially as the film progressed, and it did become more fun by the end of the film. Like the last 20 to 25 minutes were fun. They were good. They were action packed, and the action was okay. But the problem is that I was completely checked out by that point. Like it did not matter at all. Everything
Yeah.
I saw before that just took me out of the film, and I'm just sitting there like, what are we doing? And so, yeah, no, not a good movie. Not a good movie in my book. But with all of that said, let's dive into spoilers and talk about this film in more detail. So, if you've not seen Venom 3, Venom The Last Dance, this is your spoiler warning. We're going to talk about all the details. So go, I guess, watch it and then come back and finish the rest of our conversation as we dive in here. And typically we like to do character breakdowns. We'll see how much we stick to that formula here because it's
Yeah.
going to be an interesting conversation. But of course, Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock Venom here. We should start with him. And really, I guess the construct of the movie, it is sort of a road trip hangout movie, or that's what they're
Mhm.
trying to go for. They're trying to go for something of a midnight run aesthetic,
Mhm.
Venom and
Mhm.
Carnage, or Venom, excuse me, and Eddie Brock on the run. Because
Mhm.
of the crimes that he's committed, he's now been exposed to the world, especially the murder of Patrick Mulligan from the previous film has made big headlines across the country and across the world. And so Eddie is the prime suspect. And so we get sort of the tease from the Spider-Man No Way Home stinger of him being in another multiverse, to then being transported back to his universe, to him now being on the run. And that's kind of where we take off with the character. But again, I think, we both said like Tom Hardy, he is the best element to these movies. He
Yeah.
works and does just an incredible job committing to the character. He's voicing Venom. He's obviously portraying Eddie Brock. He has to do a lot here. And he's also, outside of just being an actor, he's very much an active participant in the making of these movies. He's a producer.
Mhm.
He's a co-writer on this one, so he is this property. He is this character, pretty much in every sense of the word. And so, just starting off big picture level, what do you want to say about Tom Hardy and what he brought to this film, and ultimately where they sort of landed with the Eddie Brock character and the Venom character, and sort of the conflict, I guess, that they have here in terms of them being on the run and having to make a choice, I guess, to ultimately not be the lethal protector anymore and maybe step back from that role because of just the damage and all of the destruction that's been caused in the past two movies.
Yeah, Tom Hardy is just such a talented dude. In all that he does. Again, him being able, I think, to do the voice of Venom. He's always had such an interesting, I think, take on the character that none of us really expected. Not that we had like a bunch of live action Eddie Brocks, you know what I mean, to really take from. We've had a couple here and there, but his, of course, is the most memorable just because of the way that he portrays, I think, this character, and how different he is from what I think we would imagine given comic books and I think other iterations of him. And it's just like, whoa, dude, what are you doing here? And you know, these movies, the thing that what has been the most interesting is the relationship between Eddie and Venom. And in this movie in particular, it's just that relationship is so much more less interesting than the things that we were going through and Let There Be Carnage. Like Let There Be Carnage, we were like, they were like at odds with each other. We ended up in like a gay club with glow sticks, and like I don't know, it was just a really cool different take on what that relationship looked like. And here, them being on the run, you never really for real get to sit down and have them, I think, discuss in talk about what this really means for them as two people are like, man, maybe we can't do this anymore, or maybe we shouldn't be doing this thing anymore, and we need to go because people are getting hurt and this and that. And you know, the movie opens with like this, pretty much they like dogs. And it's just like, man, that's it. Like this is our excuse to get Venom on the screen, as these people are dog fighting. And it's just like, I don't know, there's something about that feels not as venom-y, I think, as I would hope it to be. You know, Venom is an anti-hero and a lethal protector, and we know all these things. And it was funny, you know how Venom comes out, it's like, oh, dogs, they're cute. Oh, fighting dogs is where I draw the line, and that's fine. But there's something about it that just fell flat in terms of, I think, the content we look for when we see Venom on the screen. But I think, Tom Hardy, I think he still brings a lot of fun to this character. I still like to see him do the voice, and them kind of go back and forth, because at the end of the day, that's what's impressive, is you're literally seeing a dude technically talk to himself. And I think that's still cool thing to see. I just wish he had more to do in this movie, which is funny, with himself. I wish he had a more relationship with himself in this film.
And also, like, what does Eddie Brock want? Like, what does he want? What's his goal?
Good question.
We never explore any of that. And he's just on the run in this movie. It's all completely reactionary. That's the best that they could come up with. And I'm sorry, that's very thin. That's just not enough to buy into the character and have a relationship and to see him sort of develop and change. Like, a lot of what made Let There Be Carnage so successful is because they had perfectly become sort of symbiotic, and they were trying to figure out how to manage that relationship. And Venom felt like he was being disregarded and ignored, and his wants and needs weren't being addressed. And they do it in a very comedic and funny way. It's not meant to be taken seriously, but you could always hear from Venom, like, hey, you need to feed me. I need to eat. Like, you just can't keep me locked up this way. And Eddie Brock is like, well, no, you're an alien symbiote. If we expose you, then everybody's going to be here knocking on our front door. We're going to have fucking the federal government and SWAT teams here. So it actually made a lot of sense. But here, just being on the run is the only narrative thrust, I guess, that they have to propel them forward. But that's not a really key motivation for either one of them. And we don't see any desire, any sort of want or need come out of them. Everything is super reactionary. They're on the run, or they're trying to make sure that these different symbiotes that are coming from the other planet aren't going to destroy the Earth. Like, that's all it really is. And so you get the comedic beats, you get, some of the moments between those two, but it's still not even enough. Like I mentioned, like, we don't even get enough of that. Like, they couldn't even distract me from the plot holes and the things that were lacking by adding in some more comedy and some more memorable moments. If they at least had more of those things, I would be like, all right, well, they kind of nailed this relationship once again. They gave us a lot of good material, some funny things, but there's never really a moment like that even stands out for me, because I'm just looking at like all of the glaring omissions in terms of like what you're supposed to do with this character to just get us to give a fuck. Because like we don't even, I don't think we even care, once certain things happen. So it just felt like a huge disservice to what they had established in the previous two movies, and then ultimately like how it all took shape and sort of manifested here. The people that are chasing him, it's a government agency led by Chiwetel Ejiofor's character, Rex Strickland, who is your prototypical evil military person who wants to track down the villain to make sure that he doesn't destroy the world. That's really all that Chiwetel Ejiofor has to work with, who, by the way, incredible actor. just an incredible, phenomenal actor,
Yep.
who has very, very little to do here. And he's really kind of the primary antagonist of the film, if you think about it. Like there is no other like formidable force in the film in terms of a symbiote that we have to deal with, because as we have mentioned numerous times, Null is in it for zero point 0.5 seconds. And
Hmm.
so this Rex Strickland character kind of becomes the face of who is on the opposing side of Eddie Brock and Venom. And again, he's tracking him down. You know, he's supposed to be like the Tommy Lee Jones character in The Fugitive,
Hmm.
but they certainly are not writing great material for him to work off of, and to live up to that sort of idea. We kind of just get a very standard, very cliched version of a character that I think we've seen 1,000 times before in other pretty bad comic book movies. So what do you want to say about just, what they did with the Rex Strickland character and ultimately his purpose that he served in this movie?
Yeah, man, not too much to add. I was, to be honest, I didn't know he was in the movie until he popped up on the screen. I said, "Oh shit, is that Chiwetel Ejiofor?" I said, "Whoa, what is he doing here?" And I know it sounds so bad, but like you said, he's a really good actor, and I just did not expect him to be in this movie. It just really threw me for a loop because he is also an actor. He picks really good projects. Like I don't think I've ever really seen him in a bad film, to be honest, maybe until now. This is probably the worst thing I've ever seen him in. And again, just to see him pop up in movies like this, it's so campy. It's another superhero property. We know he's in the Doctor Strange films. I don't know. It was just I was just really surprised to see him here. And like you said, he kind of had he probably due to writing for sure. Like you said, a tremendous actor, but he kind of had to turn in a performance. He did what he had to do, but he had to kind of had to turn in something that was super cliche and not much to do and not a lot of nuance. Even the small turn he does for good in favor of the symbiotes at the end was like, oh wow, I haven't seen that before. Like, yeah, all right, what's going on here? I will say, it was kind of cool to see him die, even though it sounds bad. I was like, oh yeah. I was like, oh yeah, he sacrificed himself. Like that's the thing. I was like, oh, he could have lived and this and that. But I was like, oh yeah, he actually died here. It was like cool. He made a little sacrifice. That's all right. But man, again, just overall, it was fine. Fine to see him, but very surprised, I think, to see that he was in this movie, and even more unfortunate to see that he was the very typical I think antagonist that we've seen in anything else.
Well, here's the thing about his death too, which made me angry actually when I saw it.
Uh-huh.
The whole time, because I was just so perplexed by the fact that he was being so mismanaged and so misused in this film, I'm thinking, okay, maybe at some point Nola's going to show up and bound with him. He's going to bind his body
Ah.
to his character, and he's going to be
Mm,
he's going to
mm,
be
mm.
Noel, or a version of Noel who just takes over his body to use him as a, I guess, as an avatar to fight against Venom. But they don't do that. They don't utilize him in that way to become an even bigger bad. He does do the very, very cliched, like, oh, maybe I was a little bit ahead of myself. I should probably fight on the side of quote unquote good and help
Mhm.
out the protagonist here. Have a little bit of a last minute redemption before I do die off. Which just tonally, again, is all over the place because my guy, you were gung ho about catching Venom earlier on in the movie. Like that was your prime objective. And now all of a sudden you have a change of heart, which if done well, I guess can work. But how often have we seen redemption stories really work out in the best ways? Like it doesn't tend to work when you have somebody that's supposed to be so villainous and to believe in their cause so much. I kind of just want to see you stick to that. I just want to see you just
Stay
ride that out
bad.
and live up to that idea and
Mhm.
just stay bad. Like just be that guy.
Yeah.
So the whole time was just like, what are we doing here? We've seen this before. Military organization, very, very generic, doesn't add
Yeah.
anything. And also, as it relates to the pacing of the movie, what I hated was we would get these long stretches of these exposition scenes with his character and Juno Temple's character. Like they would switch back and forth between Eddie and Venom being on the run, and then we
Yeah.
would go to a scientific lab where Rex and Dr. Payne are they're talking to
Yeah.
Stephen Graham's character for minutes and minutes, and it's like this is boring. What are we doing here? And even Juno
Mhm.
Temple, she's just like a walking exposition character. She doesn't add anything
Yep.
to this movie, unfortunately. And so all of that stuff even just like made me even more frustrated because from a pacing perspective, like, okay, we have characters that we really don't care about. They're not that interesting. However, we're going to spend a lot of time in this movie with them for a movie that's not even that long. It's about an hour and 40, I think.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
we
Mhm.
spent an inordinate amount of time, I felt like, on those characters with scenes that just they just added nothing to the movie and even to the pacing and just the experience of the film, because any momentum that we might have gotten with Eddie Brock and Venom, we would instantly be ripped out of that moment and then thrown back into a scientific facility to follow some characters that we just met in this film that we have no relationship with.
Yeah. It was yeah, like you said, I don't know what we were doing, and this is added on to the boring part of the movie. Like you said, Temple comes in as just an exposition dump, and we're just like, cool. What else we got here? Part of me, this is so crazy because this is how I see it. I feel like in the story when she was younger, they're on the beach. Her brother gets hit by lightning. I think it's her brother. Her
Yeah.
brother gets hit by lightning. You did all that just for her to have a lightning symbiote. That's the only connection that we're making there. Like that, I was like, what else are we doing here? Is that also, is that even how that works? If you're holding hand with somebody that gets struck by lightning, nothing happens to you?
I don't think it works that way. I think,
I think it works like that. I don't think it works like that.
No.
But okay, if y'all say so. Again, some things I can let go of, but when things are boring and things are bad, you get a little more picky about things. So I'm like, wait a second. After a minute, I was like, does that even work? Does that even happen? But man, like you said, it just there was nothing for these characters to really do. It was boring because I could see a world though where they use Juno Temple correctly. And they do flesh her story out and they make her like this lab scientist lady. I don't know. I could just see I see a different movie where she has things to do and she's interesting and maybe she opposes Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock in some weird cool ways and she's a different kind of symbiote. I don't know, man. This just isn't that movie. And so sometimes when you watch things like this, it's also like, oh man, by the end of it, that thing could have been cool, but you didn't do it. And I think Juno Temple is a big example of that. We were talking about Chiwetel Ejiofor and his how cliche he is. That's a little different from Juno Temple of just being like, but no, you could have really made her do some cool stuff and you just didn't do it. So yeah, it was too bad.
It almost kind of felt like that they were trying to, and this might be a stretch, but maybe sort of backdoor a potential spin-off movie with her character in
Uh-huh.
this film by setting up those extra plot lines, because I don't know. I know that they tried to give her, I guess, a bit of a tragic backstory, the stuff with her brother, but again, that was just stuff that I just didn't care. I'm like, I'm not here for that, so why are we doing it? And the only thing that my
Mm-hmm.
mind went to was like, well, perhaps they're trying to maybe, I don't know, give her a movie, which just also feels very misguided. But I don't know why else you include that stuff, because
Yeah.
the end result of it, as you mentioned, like the way that we close that loop, is that supposed to be satisfying? It wasn't for me. It just didn't really add anything to the film, and ultimately, I kind of forgot about it all to begin with. Like I wasn't even just actively thinking about her B plot when things were really popping off by the end of the movie, And so when they did that, I was just like, oh right, that is a thing that they brought up earlier about her brother, but it kind of felt like it was almost for nothing by
Yeah.
that particular point. But continuing our trend of really, really talented actors who somehow signed up for this movie, Reese Fonz is here.
Oh my God.
And I think a lot of people were confused, because when you see Reese Fonz and you think about Marvel and you think about Sony Marvel in
Sony.
particular, it's like, hey, that guy played Dr. Kirk Connors in the Amazing Spider-Man movies. And he was the Lizard. He was a full-on villain. And so, well, maybe they're trying to draw some connective tissue there. Well, no, we're
Mm-hmm.
not doing that. He's a completely different character. In fact, he's just a hippie. He's just a guy. He's just a guy that Venom and Eddie meet on the road, who gives Eddie a lift to Las Vegas. Even more so than that, people who watch House of the Dragon know how talented Reese Fonz is and how
Yeah.
much of a compelling character Otto Hightower is in that show. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
ranted and raved about him all season long. Like, wow,
We
what an
did.
incredible actor, what an incredible performance. And I was just sitting there like, yo, why did he do this movie? What is he doing here? Because my goodness, him as this Martin Moon character, and really his whole family,
Yep.
his wife Nova, they're just hippies on the road, just casually driving across the country, singing David Bowie to Eddie Brock for whatever reason. Like, I was just I was just really taken aback at the usage of these people in this film. I'm just like, what? Why are we doing this to these great fine actors in this film? There's so much more that can be done here, but I thought something greater would come later, but they just kind of ended up as like tertiary characters in the fight. Like they were just kind of there to, I guess, just to lend a hand when the shit went down. So, thoughts on the Moon family, the hippie escapade that happened in the middle of the film?
Yeah, man, that's our Little Miss Sunshine Brigade right there. You know what I'm saying? We had to get him on the little bus and get old Eddie Brock to the pageant. It I just don't know. I don't. It's almost like this family is here, feel like, to be used so people remember that Venom isn't all the way bad. Venom is not Carnage. That's like the lesson with these people to me. Like you said, they're just kind of there. Reese Fahn's character in particular, Martin Moon, is like, hey y'all, I'm trying to see Area 51 before they dispose of it. All these other things, and it's just like, I guess, and that's fine, but it really feels like they're there so that Eddie Brock has somebody to save, so that Venom has somebody to save at the end of the day. Somebody you could go, oh my god, yay, you saved him. The little boy is like feeling for Eddie at some time, like, no, Eddie, because we thought Eddie was dead. And I was just like, was I supposed to feel for a little boy in that moment? I don't know if I was supposed to, but I was like, this is all kind of silly. I think coming from, they're just hippies on the road and they feel like Little Miss Sunshine in the van. But that's it. Why is Reese Fonz here? I don't know. It was so weird, and I agree. I was just sitting here like, we're Sony, and we have Reese Fonz, but you telling me that's not Dr. Connors right there in this van? This is actually blowing my mind, because this isn't like Loki, or like there's nothing in the Sony verse that tells us there could be multiple versions of anybody. So here's just this guy who happens to look like Kirk Connors. It's the same actor. It's the same actor. So I was, man, we just wasting actors at this point. We just hiring anybody at this point. And I think maybe Reese Fine, Chiwetel Ejiofor, you know, maybe all these people just needed a check real quick and they knew Sony was dishing it out. But this is the movie they picked, and it is kind of blowing my mind. Like this, the Reese Fines, like, oh my, House of the Dragon Reese, Notting Hill Reese. I don't know, bro. Whatever y'all say, dog.
Continuity, who cares? Who
Who
cares?
cares?
Like why keep up with anything that makes sense? Like it doesn't matter. And
It doesn't matter.
I just don't understand it. But, you know, I know that most people aren't thinking about these things, but, you know, again, it's just somebody and people who actively watch this stuff and keep up with it. And we know, like, oh, yeah, you know, Reese Fonz did portray like a very, very iconic Spider-Man villain at one point. He's in that canon of Spider-Man villains in live action.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very small list of people. So there's only but so many actors who've done it. Willem Dafoe and Alfred Molina and Jamie
Yeah.
Foxx. Like, we can say these names pretty quickly, and Reese Fonz is on that list. And so when he pops up in a Venom movie, a character who is also a spin-off side supporting character of Spider-Man, however, he is not who he formerly portrayed. Well, that's one question mark. And then secondly, this, you know, the next thing that makes you raise an eyebrow is like, all right, well, now this family is, I guess, showing the lighter side of Eddie Brock and Venom, of course, the, you know, Venom primarily, but again, also, you know, it's just like, well, for what? We already, I mean, we've had two films to already explore that idea. We know that Venom is not a terrible symbiote. Really, in the second film, when we introduce Carnage, that's where they really unpack that idea, because Venom is
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, you think I'm bad? You haven't
This
you
guy.
haven't met
Yeah.
this guy. Like, he's the
Mm-hmm.
worst of the worst. So we've already
Exactly.
gone down that road to just showcase that, yeah, Venom is one of the quote unquote nicer symbiotes. In fact, he said he was bullied and he was an outcast. You know, he was sort of, you know, considered strange and weird, you know, on his planet. And so we've done that work, and to readdress that idea here, to soften him up even more, not necessary. Just
Nope.
wasted space and time. And you're giving some really, really good actors here not a ton to work with, and you know, supposed to be comedic levity, supposed to be some fun moments, but again, I
Mm-hmm.
just found myself not really having that much fun. Like, we're singing David Bowie for like 3 minutes. We're just like going and going and
The
going. Like,
whole thing.
we're still singing the song. Okay, we're just gonna go through the whole thing. It just felt misplaced to me. And you know, by the time they come back at the end of it and we saw what they contributed, I guess, to the fight, it was like, all right, well, great. Now Eddie just has friends, I guess, on planet Earth. If we ever see Eddie again, if Tom Hardy ever comes back, maybe he'll have some people to call on. But probably not, because also like Michelle Williams, who was in the first two movies, no mention of her at all in this film. Like they
Mm-hmm,
don't.
mm-hmm.
I mean, we just completely write her out of the script. Like I know that
You're
they
right.
weren't together, but she had a big role in those first two movies, and there was no mention of her. So there isn't really an expectation that there's going to be a lot of continuation with threads of characters that are introduced and maybe continued on in other films. And so I don't have a ton of faith with what they did with him here. Um, let's talk about Noel,
Yep.
who where do I even start? So you pointed this out earlier. Null is a relatively new character in Marvel Comics, debuted in 2018, but in that time has become very, very popular, and
He's
and
pretty cool.
and is also very powerful character in that universe. I mean, has destroyed and defeated the Avengers and the X-Men and all sorts of teams and different heroes, and became a big primary antagonist for numerous crossover events. And so he's become very formidable. And a lot of people have called on, hey, is there a reality or a world that we can see Noel in some sort of live action movie? Whether it was this universe or the MCU, I know he was brought up a couple of times before. And
Yeah.
as you pointed out, weeks before the movie, they finally started, to hint that Noel was in the movie. I was under the impression that Noel was the villain of the film. That's what I thought. And that's probably my own fault, because admittedly, I didn't really watch trailers for this movie. I mostly stayed away from a lot of the marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I just heard that floating around, I'm thinking like, oh shit, that's pretty big. That's definitely a way to entice me and grab me. Movie comes, Nola's in it, very, very limited amount of time. Probably has like 3 speaking lines. Voiced by Andy Serkis, director of Venom, Let There Be Carnage, who comes in and portrays the character. But we barely see him. He's not in the movie really whatsoever. He's just sending down his symbiote army to Earth to kill Eddie Brock and Venom. And he's
Yeah.
looking for a codex. And it brought back very, very bad memories for me of Man of Steel. When we start talking about codexes and shit, I'm like, uh-oh,
Mm-hmm.
here we go, Zack Snyder. This is not good. This is not good. And that's what he wants, to free himself from this prison that he has on his planet. So, yeah, not a great usage of this character, especially somebody that's like so big in the comics. But here we are. Noel, what did you think about Noel and what they did here? And I guess how they potentially set up threads for whatever they might have planned for him in the future.
uh Man. Yeah. I really seeing Noel in the beginning, you're like, oh, by the end of it, we're gonna get this crazy Noel thing. We're gonna I don't even know where to start, man. Cause this character, what's so interesting about Noel is he could be so freaking cool. Like there's a reason they're using Noel. There's a reason a villain as new as Noel could even be used in a movie like this, because in that short time frame, comic book lovers, people who surround this, Noel is really freaking cool. As somebody who has been locked up by the other symbiotes, and people love symbiotes, and he's like the ultimate ruler of symbiotes. Like he's pretty much the king of darkness in the symbiote world or whatever. There's a lot of cool shit that you could do with Noel. And in fact, what I would have loved for them to do, and I know this is not, it's just so annoying because this is not a reality that we live in, but there's a BVS where Batman is Spider-Man, Superman is Venom, and Noel is Doomsday.
Mm-hmm.
That could have been one of the coolest Spider-Man films we had ever gotten. Noel descends down on the New York, and now him and Venom been going the fuck at it. But what Noel then pulled up. We got to work together. There's a whole thing that we could have been doing with Noel there that we're unfortunately never going to do because we had to put him in Venom 3 for 5 seconds to do absolutely nothing. And it's the craziest thing to me because we were just talking about, what villain could Spider Noel would have been great. People
Yeah.
were looking for we've seen Venom be used so well so many times. Shoot, I don't know, people watching, you can see a little statue from Spider-Man the video game there, but they did Venom so well. It's like, what else can we possibly do in live action Spider-Man? No was it. No was it. No
Especially with
was the
multiverse stuff and what they could have did with Secret Wars
with
specifically.
oh
Yeah.
my god, no was it. We had the key to, that's how we get Venom in there. Shoot, that's how we get Carnage in there. We can get all the symbiotes in the Spider-Man universe with Tom Holland, if Noel is like the big bad, because that's a really big bad.
Yeah.
He's not like some chump, you know what I'm saying? Like Noel is really a beast, and so man, I think they dropped the ball there. Maybe that's what they're going for too, and whatever they were trying to do at the end there. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of is like, what do you do next with Noel? It's either a bunch of symbiotes versus Noel, which is what we got ish. Again, that's not really what we got, but it's what we got ish. Or it's Noel versus whatever happens in the world of Spider-Man. And it feels like neither one of those things really happened. And it's just, yeah, it's unfortunate, but maybe that's what the mid credits was supposed to be. I honestly couldn't tell you. I will say the couple seconds we got of Noel, he looked really good. He looked great, I think. I loved his character design. I love like the dark, broody world that he lived in. Even like the idea that he's in some weird in-between realm that we exactly don't know where he is, because that gives him flexibility now to go wherever the hell that he needs to get to see him next. But I hate that they introduced him and they didn't use him. They only used his little pawns or whatever name that they had in the film. So yeah, Noel is one of the coolest ideas that again will never be used. They do that with villains a lot in these comic book movies, but Noel is just add another check mark to the list, man.
Yeah, that mid credit scene, which I suppose is to point us in the direction of a continuation with the character, perhaps in a movie, I guess. But as you said, what is a Noel movie now without a Venom? If Tom Hardy's not coming back to be Venom to fight Noel in a fourth Venom movie, then who is Noel fighting? And he's not going to be in Spider-Man. He's not going to be fighting Tom Holland. So, what is that movie? Are we redeeming Noel? Are we going to tell his
Hell
origin
no.
story and find ways to
Please
relate to
no.
him? And
Please
like
no.
that, who wants to see that shit? Like, no, we want to see him be evil and bad and dominant and scary, and I agree, the look and the sound and Andy Serkis is just always incredible,
A beast, man.
just looks great. I'm like, when you finally see his face in the mid-credit scene, it's like, oh, that's a good look. Y'all are on the right track there, and you'll continue to refine it. It'll get better over the years, but that's a great start. And he looks really intimidating and really scary, as he should. But what the future holds and the way that they slightly teased him here, like they really just, I mean, talk about foreplay. Like that's all this was. That's literally all this was.
Man.
To go where I scratch my head, I question, I ponder, like, poor K, what are we doing? I just don't understand. I don't know what the future of this character is, and it does almost feel like, man, we might have just blew our load just way too quickly, and there is no outlook, there is no future, because when you do something like this and there's no real meaningful way to pay it off, if you don't have a plan, which it doesn't feel like that they do, now you've sort of condemned the character to be in purgatory for a while again.
Yeah.
And at the New York Comic Con panel, when they were speaking about it and there were questions about Noel, I mean, Kelly Marcel was like, who knows? The future is bright. Anything can happen. Well, that's not really reassuring that, hey, we have a plan. We have things coming. No, we'll be back. Like, none of that language was ever said. So I'm just thinking like, so yeah, we just threw the character in there, figure it the fuck out. Just wait. We'll figure it out. We'll do something. That's never a good way. For a character that could be really huge and really big and be really meaningful. You just don't want to see it go down that way. So yeah, I thought that there was going to be a lot more. I was sorely disappointed realizing just how little he really had to do in this film. I guess like at this point, really the last act is where shit kind of gets crazy. They're at the Area 51 section, and a big fight breaks out. There's a bunch of symbiotes. Even the Sadie character, she's another scientist alongside Rex and Teddy Payne. She ends up getting bonded with the symbiote, and has like green colored hair. I will say, like, the different symbiote looks were kind of cool at this particular point. There was one that was like a little thicker, a little stockier, that looked a little cool, had a yellowish color. That stuff was nice to look at. And when thinking about like a bigger symbiote sort of story and world, we just kind of alluded to Secret Wars. It's like, man, that could be really, really good stuff there. Like, that's perfect prime setup for like what they could do with Secret Wars. But unfortunately, it just doesn't feel like that'll be accessible by the time we do get to that movie. But this was the part of the film, just admittedly, I enjoyed the most. Like just the
Yep.
nonstop action, the over the top chaos, all of the stuff that was going down, and then ultimately, the big sacrifice from Venom, to sort of sacrifice himself and
Hmm.
allow Eddie to be free, and ultimately sort of just take on the responsibility of allowing himself to perish, so that the world would not be destroyed by this big symbiote army. I suppose it was supposed to be somewhat of an emotionally affecting moment. It didn't hit me quite that way. It was okay. It was
Hmm.
somewhat well done. Like, oh yeah, I do like those two, and to see them separate is it's something to consider and think about. But this was easily the strongest portion of the film, where it's like, yeah, this stuff is cool. It's nice to look at. It's big spectacle, big action. But again, I think it was just too little, too late at this point for it to
Yeah.
redeem the movie and take it to another level. Just considering everything that preceded it.
Yeah, it's very rare where I'm like, oh, that, especially in a comic book movie, where I'm like, that third act was the best part of the movie. But here I am saying it really is. And I think for me, this was again, it was just so comic booky and the action looked decent. And there are earlier parts of the movie where I like don't like the lighting. I know I can't explain that as much as I would like to, but I'm like, ugh, this doesn't look that great to me. But there was something about it that worked in that last act. Like, again, they're in the middle of nowhere. It's just like, okay, I can buy it in this, I think, environment that we're in. But to just see all these different symbiotes come about was cool. And I think for a lot of people, that's what we're here for, is to just see these weird symbiotes. Like you said, Sadie, the other scientist, she becomes a cool new she Venom, because she had like the Christmas tree, I think, on her jacket, which they tried to make it a whole story, but I was just like, whatever. It's just cool to see a new little she Venom thing, and there's Phage and like whatever. But I think it was just really fun things, like even that one with Sadie, her she Venom, she had so many different arms and tendrils and knives, and I was like, whoa, that's different than some of the other ones we've seen. She looks way more violent. And I think there's always something cool in the nuance of the different symbiotes that we get. And I know a lot of people were excited to see Toxin whenever Toxin showed up. It was a lot of people's favorite symbiote. Unfortunately, Toxin, I think, passed away. I don't know what happened to Toxin. We see a different symbiote in this one, but I don't know. It's just really interesting. I think whenever we can have big action set pieces with different symbiotes or symbiotes in general, and they can make it look decent. Like you said, the CGI was really good. Some of the action was comprehensible. I was having a good time with it. It was helicopters and whatever the other Knowles monsters were. I didn't really care about them, but they were cool designed monsters. I thought they were doing what they need to do. They were formidable. The symbiotes couldn't really deal with them. I was like, dang, it's really taking everybody to kind of take these things down. And so I love that everyone kind of, it was like symbiote Power Rangers. You know what I mean? Like you said, the different colors you see. I was like, yeah, this is cool. I can deal with this. But like you said, that moment with Venom, having to separate from Eddie, it did feel like something, because it was like, dang, Venom's about to sacrifice himself. We did spend time with these two over the course of 3 films. You know what I mean? It was like 4.5 hours probably watching these dudes on screen. And so to see them separate was something. Like, it wasn't as heartfelt as I wanted it to be either. There was something missing, and it could just be this movie wasn't as good as it should have been, but there was something there. Like, oh man, y'all really, this is what the last dance is supposed to mean at the end of it. So there was a little bit there, and I think it helped with the music. It helped with the green acid coming out. You could kind of see him suffering too at the same time. Also helped, I think, to that moment. I was like, dang, Venom's really going through it, trying to sacrifice himself for what is in this moment the greater good. So I like that moment. I like the last act. I think they were doing okay in those last couple moments there.
Speaking of the Last Dance, I'd be remiss to not at least mention Mrs. Chen, who did pop up earlier in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they don't give her anything to do. They're like, she has nothing to do, but she does share a moment with Venom and Eddie. They do have like a dance moment. This was probably outside of the hippie van shit. This was probably another like silly moment. They're dancing to ABBA in a casino.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Chin was also, I think, one of the more beloved characters from especially the first movie, but also the second movie too.
Yeah.
Just because like she knew Eddie was Venom and Venom was Eddie, and she was completely unfazed by any of it. She just it didn't bother her in the slightest. But they shared a brief moment as well earlier in the film that was okay. I guess they just had to close the loop on her character because they didn't have literally anything for her to do. But that was just like a nice moment. But yeah, ultimately that really does kind of bring it to the end of the movie. I mean, there's not a ton to say in terms of the events that happened. It's pretty cut and dry in terms of what the story is and the different beats that happened here. I guess I do want to mention the in credit scene, the very post credit scene, where we see the bartender, played by Cristo Fernandez. Shout out to him from Ted Lasso. He's back here. We first saw him technically in the post credit scene or the mid credit scene, I guess, for Spider-Man No Way Home, when Venom shows up in the MCU. He's at a bar. He's getting the rundown on all the events. Like, oh, you guys had a purple alien come to Earth and people vanished. And the bartender's like, hey, yeah, my family, like, don't joke about that. That was a very dark time. They flash back to that at the beginning of this movie, but then this post-credit scene, we see him again, I guess leaving a facility, and it looks like a black cockroach crawls from the rubble of a broken vial that I suppose previously contained a sample of the Venom symbiote. And I don't know. I guess it's just to inform us, like, yeah, there's going to be more symbiote action in the future. Oh yeah, the symbiote's loose and free, but we have literally seen this post-credit scene before. Like, they did this exact post-credit scene in Spider-Man No Way Home. When Venom left that universe, he left behind a piece of the symbiote. And here we are, we're just leaving pieces of the symbiote as if that's like a tease when we know, yeah, there's probably going to be more symbiote stuff. So I don't know if you want to say anything about that particular post-credit scene, but I guess it was supposed to get us excited about the fact that, like, yeah, maybe Venom will continue. It just won't be Eddie Brock, or maybe it'll be this bartender guy who gets overtaken by the symbiote. I don't know, but it just kind of also just felt like an empty, hollow moment that didn't really mean anything.
Yeah. Very rarely do I wait for a post-credit scene at the end and I'm like actually a little bit mad that I waited. Like,
really could have left.
I was like, wow, that's it for real. Like, so many people in the theater were so lost, and I'm with them. I was like, huh? And usually I'm pretty tapped in, right? Like, usually I'm like, oh, I know exactly what that was. I know where this is going. That I was like, that's it. That's what I waited for. I waited for the credits for that. It made me mad a little bit. Because why are we doing that? For what? Like, we know this is literally called The Last Dance. We know this is Tom Hardy's done. If we ever see Venom again, I don't know. Like, I just, there's so many questions that just make me so angry of why you would throw that in there, especially when you're trying to end this thing. Like, just end it. If you're going to end it, don't give us a post-credit scene. It could have been a little callback to, I think, the one security guards and whatchamacallit. Well, they were in the movie talking about, cockroaches live. They usually surpass all other kind of life forms, whether it's nuclear war, all that stuff. Their cockroaches are usually the ones left over. And it's like, oh, after this big war, here's a cockroach left over, and we're gonna put a symbiote on it. Like, what is that supposed to mean to me? Like, it doesn't mean anything. And so if it's supposed to hint towards future symbiotes, bad job. Like, I don't think you had to do that. And if so, you could have done it in a different way. I don't think that was the way to do it. And then on the other end is just like, yeah, just why do it at all? Because we know this is it for at least Tom Hardy's Venom. And so, yeah, it's just annoying. I would have rather have seen them talk about the symbiote that was left on the that keeps getting left on the counters. There was 2 symbiotes left on counters in these things.
We're
like,
just leaving symbiote DNA everywhere, all over the place,
dropping it everywhere. Next is gonna end up in, I don't know, Paddington, whatever. It's just kind of it's just kind of crazy that we're leaving symbiotes everywhere. But yeah, I just wanted to say I've never been more frustrated at a post credit scene. I think I was at that one. I was just like, wow, that's it.
They were really long credits too. It wasn't like a short wait. The credits were pretty long, so you had to stick around. But also, if 30 symbiotes come to Earth, I'm already assuming that some of that fucking DNA is going to be left over. You don't have to show me. Matter of fact, you don't have to make me wait 15 minutes just to tell me what I can already naturally assume. Like, of course there's going to be symbiote DNA left behind. Like, that just makes sense. And we have literally done this scene multiple times already. I think we all know, and we're all very privy to the fact that somewhere out there's some symbiote DNA that's going to latch on to a host at some point. So
Mhm.
what is this adding? This doesn't add anything. It adds literally a zero sum to what you're trying to achieve here. In addition to another post-credit scene or the mid-credit scene, which just has Noel looking into the camera saying, "Hey guys, I'll be back. Wait till you see me again." Okay, great, my guy. I kind of already assumed that. No other reason to introduce you into this movie. It's just all just silly and unnecessary to me. It just doesn't. It just we're just like adding in things just to do it. It's
Mhm.
like Sony knows, like, hey guys, we have to have like something at the end, right? Like they're gonna stick around, so we have to have something. And this is the best that they could come up with because they don't have a legit plan. That's what it is. They don't have a plan. If you had a
None.
plan, you would be building towards another movie in this
Mhm.
post-credit scene, and we would know what that is, but they clearly
Yep.
don't. And that's okay, but don't try to make it out to be that you do have a plan. Don't try to
Exactly.
set us up in the fact that it's like, yeah, this might continue and there might be more. Like, just say you don't have a plan. Just say
Mhm.
that there's no plan, guys, and we don't know what we're gonna do because we have no fucking clue. Because it kind of depends probably on Tom Holland and how long he's gonna want to play the character over
That's
for
true.
Disney and Marvel. And so, yeah, just added very little to nothing to this overall experience. Um, as we wrap up this discussion and start to sort of close this out, um, I just want to ask: is this the worst year for comic book movies that we've gotten? I mean, it's not been great. Like, just thinking about the
It's been
releases that
pretty
we've
bad.
gotten: Madam Web,
Mm.
Joker Folie Ado, now
Mm.
Venom the Last Dance,
Mm.
Hellboy the Crooked Man, not
Shit.
good. Just watch
The
that.
the Crow.
The Crow, haven't seen it yet, but by all accounts, probably pretty bad. And even with Deadpool and Wolverine, which is undoubtedly huge success, many people loved it, but also there's a
Mhm.
lot of people that are very critical about the story of that film. Like it's
Yeah.
kind of just a fan service nostalgia trip, if we're being honest. Like it's
And
not really
that's
a story.
fair criticism.
They
Fair
they
criticism.
they
Yeah.
they heavily leaned on the goodwill that we have for people like Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, which is not a dumb thing to do. That's a smart
Right.
thing to do, but that's kind of where the movie
Mhm.
stops if we're being real. Um I mean, I don't know of a year that's been this bad in recent memory. Like the only years that I can really think of are, I think, 2010. 2010 was pretty bad. We had
Mm.
we had Jonah Hex that year. We had Iron Man 2 that year. What else did we have in 2010? 2010 was just not a great year overall. I know that 1997 was pretty abysmal. 1997 is Batman and Robin, it's Steel, and it's Spawn in 1997. That's a pretty abysmal year as well.
Sheesh.
And even like last year had a lot of underperformers. Last year is when we saw the box office start to like really crater. And,
Yeah.
and and people rejected the movies, but you still had runaway successes like Guardians 3,
Mhm.
Across the Spider-Verse.
Yep.
Blue Beetle was a solid movie. I know we both
Yep.
enjoyed a lot of stuff about the Flash, and so
Yeah.
there were still good movies. But yeah, thinking about like just overall years in terms of output, uh 2024 has to be in the conversation for like one of the worst, I think, at this point.
Yeah. What's crazy is even on the animated side of things, I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard nothing but really bad things about Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 3, which is
Awful.
when when
Awful.
you seen it?
Oh, I've seen all three parts that they made me sit through, and they're not good. They're really not good. In fact, this whole Tomorrowverse stuff that they've been doing for the
Yeah.
past ever since they ended the last, sort of New 52 style
Mhm.
stuff, I've pretty much liked none of these movies. And this this
Yep.
this conclusion, this crisis event, it was not good.
Yeah, so that just adds to like this might really and legit be the like if somebody asked me what's a good comic book movie that came out this year, I think all I could tell them is Deadpool Wolverine would be that'd be it. That may be the only thing, the only comic book film I could put on the list. And that might literally indicate the worst comic book year that we've ever had. Yep.
Man,
I think you're
it's
right, bro.
I
I think you're
mean,
right. I
even on
don't
the TV
see
side of things, like Echo, not great. Agatha's okay, I think, for me. Penguin's been really good. That's been like the best TV show out of everything. But yeah, from a specific movie standpoint, like you said, animated live action, it's just not been good. I think I'm looking at 2007 right now. We had Ghost Rider, Spider-Man
Ooh,
3, and
ooh,
Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer all in that year. That's a
eh,
pretty it's a pretty rough year. I admit I'm a fan of Spider-Man 3. I know I'm in the
yeah,
minority. But also here's another thing that adds on to that conversation though. Like back in those days, we were only getting like 3 or 4 movies at most.
that's
Now we're
true.
getting a lot more. And so the
Hmm.
opportunity to miss is much more frequent. Imagine if Craven is just it's abysmal. If that's
Mm,
bad, then that sort of completes
yeah.
just a really, really rough year all around.
Hmm. Yeah, it does. Because that's like, yeah, just adding fuel to the fire. Yeah, I just don't see any other year that can beat it because like they're way more frequent, and it's easy to compare. You just compare it to what last year was, and last year we knew was a hard year, but even then, Beetle's not Blue Beetle's not a bad movie. I don't think The Flash is a bad movie. You know what I'm saying? A lot of the ones that you just named, I'm like, that's bad or that's not good. These are not good movies, and so yeah, this might legit 2024 might legit be the worst year for which is what's also so interesting about that is I remember I've been talking at length that 2025 had such this like this could be the best year for comic book movies that we've ever seen, but it's getting scary out here. 2024 is one of the worst. You know what I'm saying? So it only makes me more apprehensive for the things that's to come potentially for next year, even as excited as I feel like I could and should be for a lot of those films.
So let's talk about that, because we have discussed at length on this show about the idea with superhero fatigue or whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to categorize it as. The idea that comic book films, superhero films are not quite as popular as they once were, with few exceptions, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a conversation we've been having since the pandemic, really, since like 2021, when we were like starting to really get back. That has been actively like, oh, is the comic book movie dead? Is that era over? um the more the years go by and you start to see the diminishing returns at the box office, the bad
Mm,
performance amongst critics and audiences, like
yeah.
now this is becoming a real thing. It's not just an idea or a concept anymore. It's like, well, tangibly, we're seeing a streak of repeating behavior here. Um, After 2024, I don't know about you, but it kind of feels like 2025 might be the last year that we
Mm-hmm.
can that we can start to dismiss the idea that this really might be over. Like if
Yeah.
next year, let's say it's, I don't know how many it is coming out next year, but let's say we're getting 6 movies next year.
Mm-hmm.
If 5 of them are bad, I think
Oh
we
my
have to
God.
actively say like, guys, it's over. It's a wrap. I think we might actively have to say like it's over. It's actively over, because there are no more excuses. We're not in a pandemic anymore. The strike would have been passed. DC has started and stopped again. Marvel has
Mm-hmm.
reset. It's supposed to be a new, I guess, quote unquote era. They're supposed to kind of go back to their ways of quality over quantity. Like what excuse will we have left to say like, oh, this is why this was bad, or this is why that this didn't work? So how pivotal is it that 2025 gives us what we expect? Like we're getting Captain America: Brave New World, we're getting
Mm-hmm.
Thunderbolts, we're getting
Yeah.
Fantastic Four, James
Yeah.
Gunn's Superman.
Superman.
These
Mm-hmm.
are all very, very, very important projects for all parties involved. And so I think we're kind of at a turning point here. 2022, 23, and now 24. We've had to go back and forth and have these conversations, but next year ain't no more excuses, if you ask me.
Yeah, and what's also interesting about that one movie that I was like, oh, we we have a shoe in for a win, got pushed back. That's Batman. Batman got pushed. Everything else next year, all the movies you just named, they're all gambles. Like they're not. None of those are movies that everybody is 100% sure about when they come out. That we know we're gonna get some bangers. It's not. Instead, they're all like. They all have really high ceilings and also really low floors. Like we don't know what's going to go down. And so it puts so much pressure. It's so interesting because everything is such a everybody's always at odds with each other. Like everything is DC versus Marvel and all the everybody. It's always at war. but now it feels like everyone kind of needs to work together in a way, right? Like it feels like it almost feels like Superman just can't be good. We kind of need Captain America or Thunderbolts to be good. Like we kind of need some of these other films to be good because they're all kind of working in tandem with each other because they're all related. And so it puts that much pressure on all of it, to be honest. And shoot, to be honest, even more pressure on Captain America to start off the year. You know what I mean? So it's a lot. But yeah, almost because of the performance of this year, it only puts way more stress on what's supposed to happen in 2025 for all the reasons we just said. It's the last year we have to say, well, now what? You said you were doing all these things. We're getting back to it. We've done reshoots. James Gunn is restarting the DCU. Thunderbolts, sure. I mean, these movies have decent trailers. You know what I'm saying? But it's like after that, there's no more excuses, and it really might be the death of the comic book movie. Especially if you think about Marvel is like, okay, like we talked about multiple times, they can reboot later, give them a couple years, and they'll reboot and do something else. James Gunn would be like, I just started. You know what I'm saying? Like, what the heck am I supposed to do? I just got here. What are y'all saying? And so again, there's so much pressure on these movies, man. It's kind of insane. But yeah, it's up to Captain America and Superman to get us together. And it's funny how accurate that is in the landscape of what comic books is supposed to be. But wow, the story it wrote itself, man. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's already, there's early word out about Captain America at this point now that is not the most flattering. Is it going to be the worst thing we ever see? Highly unlikely. There is sort of a standard of quality that we expect out of the MCU on the movie side. I can't say that same thing for the TV side, but will it be this runaway success? Will everybody love it? Will it divide the fan base? A lot of those questions are still TBD, but yeah, I think if we are at this point next year at the end of 2025 and we look back and reflect and say like, man, this was not a good year for comic book movies, I think we have to throw our hands up and just say like, it was fun. It was fun, guys, while we had it, but it is actively done now because man, it's been a rough 3 years now, I would say, going on 4 for a lot of these movies. Obviously, big wins that have been thrown in there cannot sort of dismiss the successes of certain films that we actively praise on this show, but by and large, the narrative, the conversation is like, yeah, this isn't what it used to be. More specifically with Sony, we got Craven coming up in about a month. We'll see what happens with that. Outside of that, I don't know what's really next for them. Outside of the animated Spider-Verse stuff, and of course Tom Holland, which we've already talked about. They do have the Spider-Man Noir series that's filming right now. In fact, some stuff leaked on TMZ a few days ago from some set photos. I actually just got back from LA and I was on the lot, and they're filming on the Warner Brothers lot. It's actually kind of crazy. And that has potential, I suppose, for live action, but we don't even know if that's like connected to the animated film because it is Nicolas Cage coming back as the character, but I don't know what they're doing with that. But what comes next for Sony Marvel? I guess similar sort of idea and question. If Craven is if it shits the bed, do they throw their hands up and say like, hey guys, animation, television, we're just going to pivot to those, no more theatrical movies? Do they just like find new characters? There's certain other ones that they've tossed around that we haven't really heard much about, like you said, Cindy Moon, Silver and Black, Silver Sable. Like I don't know if that's going to be a thing at all, but or is this just all moot and we should just be done with this? Like should we just end this idea of these spin-off films, because we are living in this age of like, oh yeah, let's do like the villain focused film, the anti-hero focused film, but I think we're starting to just see the limitations of that stuff. We saw it with Joker Folie à Deux. We're seeing it with this movie, this trilogy. Like there's only but so far you can go if you don't have the hero. Like it's only going to be so interesting. So do you think that maybe we just reached the maximum potential of what these movies could be, and they should just probably just start anew and try to figure out a way to get Spider-Man involved somewhere?
Yeah, I think the Spider-Man piece is the most important there. Like at some point you have to it's time to make a drastic and radical change. And I think Sony in their relationship with their Sony or their Marvel characters that they have, their Spider-Man characters that they have, it has to change in some way. Like you have to start thinking more outside the box or even inside the box. We've all said, "Oh, why does just Andrew Garfield just be this Spider-Man or come up with a new Spider-Man for the Sony?" You know, I don't know, do something else. At least makes more sense to us. You know what I'm saying, as the viewer, because we're watching this like, okay, where is any of this going? Because the most frustrating thing about this is everything we've been talking about. Where you telling me you're going to introduce these characters and now Tom Holland can't use them? Okay, that's frustrating. Maybe you should tweak that idea and change that idea. Maybe there's another idea here where it's like we're gonna use Morbius and trying to connect him to these other characters.
Oh
But
God,
why?
no,
Why is
no.
why is it, what are we doing? Why is any of this here again without Spider-Man? I just don't see any world in where any of this makes any sense. And if so, get your own Spider-Man. Make up
Get your
You know
own.
what I'm saying? Get your own. You're Sony. Like, bring in Cindy Moon live action and have that tied to your villains. You know what I'm saying? Do something else, but make a radical change at this point because it's just not working. And I think unless you do something different, throw it away. You know what I'm saying? I don't think there's any in between. Right now, it feels like an in between. Live action isn't working. Here's why. Here's what you could do to maybe try something else. And if you're not going to do that, then we should give up on it and maybe try to maybe change some of your rules that you're enforcing on yourself and on the MCU because it's not fair to anybody at that point. Like we get it, you want to make your money, but I think we've clearly seen there's other ways for Sony to get money. So yeah, they just need to pivot, I think.
Why haven't we heard about that's interesting because I think people naturally just go to Peter Parker. Why haven't we heard just about, hey guys, there's many other Spider-Men, Spider-Women, like there is Cindy Moon, there is Ben Riley, like there are these other characters
Shit, so many.
that you have access to that
We
could
got
be your
Jessica,
Spider
Hobie,
Person. Yeah, exactly. Like they could be your Spider
Miguel.
Person, but you don't have to make it Peter Parker. Peter Parker could be MCU exclusive. Tom Holland, that's his bag. We don't want competing Peter Parkers.
Exactly.
Totally get that, but there's all these other central figures that could be leveraged and can be, I think, could be exposed to larger audiences because even, there's still a good contingent of people who haven't seen the animated movie, so they might not even be aware of all
Mm-hmm.
these different versions. But like that's an interesting through line that can make a new hero very, very popular very quickly, and it'll be fresh, but we can still also
Yeah.
have them be on the opposite side of very notable villains, your Venoms and your Carnages and your Knowles and all these people. So that's even confusing that we
Easy.
haven't even made it to, hey guys, let's go back to a hero focused film and just use a different Spider Person.
Easy. Like there's too many spiders. There's way too many spiders for us to be like, we can't use Peter. We're gonna make all villain. Like it just and it's what also makes that interesting is with each spider comes a different personality. They're all in different situations. They're all you can even Spider Gwen is whatever.
It's right there.
There's so many it's right there. Like she's like one of the most popular spiders in comics. It's just ridiculous. What are we doing? But yeah, what makes it interesting is like you've seen Peter deal with Green Goblin and Sandman and all these people. You ain't never seen all them spiders deal with none of them people.
Mm-hmm.
It's something new and fresh automatically. You get a different spider. Now the villain relationship looks different. It literally it's almost like taking what they're doing in Spider-Verse but make it live action in some ways. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like you have a different protagonist and now your villains change because your protagonist is different. It's not that hard in my mind, but it's something about it. It's like I don't know. It's the villain anti-hero of it all that interests them so much. Or like it almost feels like sometimes they're making these movies and there's a rule that they'll never be in the MCU, but there's like an overarching energy of like, but what if they're in the MCU? Oh, we can't do that. You know what I mean? I can't explain that, but it's always
Holding
like
out
a
hope that they may be able to like get that in the MCU.
exactly.
At some point.
Every movie feels like, oh, but what if? Even we just talked about Venom. There's so much stuff in the Last Dance. It's like we're going to New York. Why? Why the hell are we going to New York if we ain't gonna never bring up Spider-Man? Why? Why are we there? And so yeah, it's weird, man. It's weird.
Yeah, that's a good point. The New York of it all in this film, it's so pointless. Like why does Eddie all of a sudden have a desire to go to New York? That makes no sense. We're never gonna see him with Peter Parker. But yeah, that's the whole thing that just I really don't get it. It almost makes me think there must be something contractually that has to be
Has to be.
like, because it just doesn't make sense when
Has
you
to
really
be.
think about it like that. Like, I don't know if in the contracts maybe it's like Peter Parker can be the only live action Spider-Man at a particular. I don't know if that is
Yeah.
it. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's written in the the fine print of these contracts, because the fact that we haven't exploited these other characters in live action yet, the heroes, the other Spider
Yeah.
people, especially after the animated stuff, is just confounding to me. I just won't ever get it.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps the Spider-Man Noir series is a window into what that could look like.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, like, all right, that's cool on TV, that's cool for streaming, but like, where's my movie? What does
Yeah,
that look like with the
exactly.
big screen treatment? Like, let's go all in with this.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to see. Any last thoughts? Venom, The Last Dance, Tom Hardy, the legacy of these films, what they've added, what they've taken away from the comic book genre over the past 6 or 7 years. Before we wrap up here,
Just interesting experiment. Shout out to Tom Hardy for he's such an interesting actor, just in general. He's always trying new things and do characters, and he'll always be interesting, I think, to watch for me. Venom, still love the character. These movies, ooh, not so much. I think the first two will be still fun to watch, even though I know they're not that good of movies. This one, maybe not so much. I probably won't revisit this one too many times, if ever again. But I actually am still glad they did this little experiment, because we can see what I do kind of like seeing what Venom could be without Spider-Man, even though it's not the best experiment or the smartest thing to do. It's like, oh, that's what that could look like. So I'm okay with them doing that. I had a good time. I think with the experiment for what it was, but in terms of the comic book genre, I think they did maybe hurt a little bit of what quality we were looking for in some of these characters, and part of me still has something deep down within me that still was like, man, there's a really good Spider-Man and Venom movie out there. And will we ever get it? I don't know. Again, Spider-Man 3, too much going on. They tried, but it's still not what I needed it to be. But somewhere out there, there's a really good Spider-Man Venom story. And this trilogy didn't give it to me. And I don't know if we'll ever get it, but I can still hold out a little bit of hope. Venom is just one of those characters that I think I'll always love for what he stands for. And to be honest, comic wise, the Lethal Protector and the stuff he has with Spider-Man is some of the coolest shit you'll ever see in comics. It's just really that legendary and that cool. So I think it's okay for me to both hold out hope and also be a little disappointed in the things that I've gotten over the years. But with that being said, man, just happy with the experiment. But we'll see. We'll see if we ever see Venom again.
Sony just refuses to make that movie. We just can't do that. No, and we can't make $2 billion off of that movie. We just refuse.
Easy,
But
easy.
I think it is what it is with these movies. It is what it is, and I like Tom Hardy. I like that he got the bag. I like that he was able to lead a franchise and have his own, after all these years in performing in Hollywood, and being able to, like, finally take something and have ownership and leverage over it, and really make his mark. It gave me a couple of really good moments. I guess first and foremost, being able to see Carnage in live action on screen, was a really cool thing. Um, but I guess in closing with this, these movies, they have their place. They are enjoyed by many. They are enjoyed by many.
Mm-hmm.
They are meant to be fun popcorn B movies and not to be taken seriously. They're not the high watermarks of what we've seen out of a comic book movie, nor were they ever designed to be that, and that's okay. That's fine. Although I do want them to aim higher and try to go after more. I'd still have a certain expectation in terms of quality and story and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. I did get a few good moments out of this, and a few good laughs here and there. But I think that this, again, in looking at it with hindsight being 2020, for me, this is just an example of hey guys, comic book movies, they have the juice right now, so let's just fucking make it. And we'll
Yeah.
run with it and make it happen, and we'll see how successful it goes. And these were uber successful, and it worked for the time that it happened. But I don't think we'll ever see anything like this again. And that's probably a good thing. I think it's probably good that we can move past this. And for me personally, I'm fine if we put a lid on Venom for a while. It won't be for
Hmm.
long. Like, he's just too valuable of a character to go away. But we've tried so many times, and it hasn't really worked out for the most part. Besides the video game that just came out, and I think that they did a pretty good job. I'm fine with that. Um, so until we can get something that's really meaningful and really different and going to add value to what this character is in terms of like big screen interpretations and his relationship with Spider-Man, like, we can just hold off and just like hold off for a while until that's going to make sense. And I don't know when that's going to be, honestly. And Sony, I just implore the filmmakers to just really re-examine and reevaluate what's going on over there, because these characters do deserve better. Like, if we're being completely honest, like, these characters, this universe, like, all of this stuff does deserve better. You've had a few wins here and there, but by and large, like, we just need some new vision, some new direction, and purpose is the most important thing. Like, what is the purpose? What is the point? Why are we here? Why does this matter? Why is it going to be important? And why should we show up to see it? If we can answer those questions, then you can expect me in that movie theater, but we will certainly have to see. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the final Venom film, Venom: The Last Dance. If you checked this out this past weekend, hit us up and let us know what you think about it.